Jacques Derrida introduced the term hauntology in his 1993 book Spectres of Marx. Playing on the word ontology, he describes hauntology as a means of understanding the present and future, in which the past never fully disappears, but lingers, disrupting all spheres of life. He also suggests that hauntology's temporality involves past events, continuing to shape the present in both visible and invisible ways. As Derrida said, time is out of joint. It is beside itself, disarticulated, dislodged, dislocated. It does not itself happen as an event, but it haunts. It is always already deferred, repeated, promised. Here, promising can be directly linked to the progress that neoliberal capitalism promises, but never quite arrives at. New technological systems continuously promise better futures, more efficiency, growth, acceleration, optimization.
At 2 p.m. on the 22nd of March 2013, Nigel Brady, a worker from Didcot A, films the control room a few hours after the final desync of Unit 1. Towards the end of the shift, he goes on to describe, this song popped up, at random, on the Brennan sound system. Just the right music for the moment. Didcot Power Station, consisting of Didcot A, constructed in 1964, and Didcot B, constructed in 1994, was a coal and later gas-fired power station located in Oxfordshire, England, operating until its gradual closure and demolition in the 2010s. Recognizable through its giant cooling towers, the site became one of the most visible symbols of Britain's industrial energy infrastructure, and could be seen across large parts of the surrounding landscape. Constructed during a period of post-war industrial expansion, the power station in many ways embodied the modernist belief in technological progress, continuous growth, and large-scale energy production. As part of the national grid, it played a significant role in supplying electricity to British homes.
Once functioning as a monumental symbol of industrial energy production and national modernization, the power station in Didcot embodied a vision of technological progress tied to extraction, fossil fuel dependency, and economic expansion. Rising above the surrounding landscape, its cooling towers operated not only as an infrastructural element, but as ideological monuments to industrial modernity itself. Physical manifestations of a future imagined only possible through continuous growth, energy consumption, and human control over nature. And the power station did not simply occupy the landscape, it actively reorganized it. The surrounding environment became reshaped according to the operational demands of industrial energy production, connecting extraction networks, transport infrastructure, labor systems, and patterns of habitation into a larger industrial apparatus. In this sense, the landscape itself became infrastructural, structured around circulation, productivity, and energy consumption, rather than local ecological rhythms or communal forms of life. The monumental scale of the site extended its influence far beyond its physical boundaries, transforming not only the visual identity of the region, but also the ways in which space was organized, inhabited, and understood.
So, ode to Didcot Power Station. What vasty thighs outspread to give thee birth, Didcot, thou marvel of the plain. Colossal funnels of the steamship earth, Thy consummate immensity enshrines the rare propensity of fumes to form eternal acid rain. While in their pious hosts Romano-Celtic ghosts are knelt to worship thy all-belching amphorae, and shadows of thy sacrificial breathing fill the sky.
Now a post-industrial landscape, the site exists as both residue and transition. The cooling towers no longer dominate the horizon in Didcot, yet the logic of the infrastructure, which has taken hold of the landscape, continues to haunt the terrain through traces embedded within the landscape itself. Novelist Dame Marina Warner, in a documentary for the BBC in 1991, said the towers symbolize heedless, overflowing consumption with an ironic economy of form. And like the monuments, they contain the promise of ruin. Warner's observation reveals the contradictory temporality embedded within industrial infrastructure itself. Even at the height of their operational power, the cooling towers already carried within them the inevitability of decay, obsolescence, and collapse. What once functioned as a monument to industrial futurity has become a space of uncertainty where ecological succession, redevelopment, memory, and infrastructure afterlives overlap. The landscape carries the remnants of a future that was once imagined as permanent.
Neoliberal extractivism as a driver and logic is always forward-looking. It justifies itself through the promise of future development and prosperity. This myth of progress frames technological development as a continuous movement forward, a future built through expansion, innovation, speed, and endless growth. Industrial infrastructures emerge as a monument to this belief, projecting visions of permanence and collective advancement onto the landscape itself. The post-industrial landscape destabilizes the idea of progress as linear or permanent. Instead, it reveals modernity as cyclical. Each technological era constructs its own vision of the future, only to eventually leave behind new ruins, new ecologies, and new forms of haunting. The landscape surrounding what was once Didcot Power Station in Oxfordshire is a site where this becomes visible. And it is important to look at specific sites, at the local, at sites close to us, since neoliberal capitalism in its globality creates a psychological distance in us that ultimately serves it, so it can continue to exist, undeterred. For it all seems far away, abstract, inevitable. We need to combat this as best we can.
The logic of neoliberal capitalism does not simply redesign landscapes, it reorganizes agency itself. As industrial and later computational infrastructures expanded, decision-making increasingly shifted away from local communities and towards systems shaped by capital, efficiency, and extraction. Agency became embedded within networks of production, logistics, and economic growth rather than a collective intention. Taking away local agency and moving it into globalized capitalism, as agency is tied to capital.
It is quite weird because it is an actual switch. It's a bit sort of James Bond or something. There's a real switch to switch off the whole power station.
When you're ready. Right, units off.
And it's all off, so Didcot A is no longer supplying power to the national grid. It's all over.
In Didcot, decision-making became embedded within networks of energy production, circulation, and industrial growth that operate beyond individual human control. In this sense, infrastructures operate not as neutral technological tools, but as mechanisms through which capitalism spatially organizes and redesigns the world. Landscapes become operational as they stop being organized around local, ecological, community needs, and increasingly become organized around economic and infrastructural functionality. In this sense, infrastructure functions as a spatial tool of capitalism. It determines how space is organized, how bodies move through it, and what forms of labor are supported, and what kinds of futures become imaginable.
Personal thing really, because those towers have been up since before I was born, so they've always been like a landmark, finding my way home from a long journey.
You sort of end up seeing the towers whenever you come in from the motorway, and it's like it's something to say, oh, you're nearly home.
I feel quite sad losing them, really. Yeah, skyline's changed now.
Over time, industrial ruins are absorbed into new ecological and social processes. Vegetation grows through concrete. Former extraction zones become wetlands, cultural districts, or speculative redevelopment projects. The landscape continuously transforms, carrying traces of previous systems, while simultaneously generating new meanings and futures, which are built on new and old myths of progress. In this sense, the post-industrial landscape functions not only as a remnant of industrial modernity, but as a living archive of its ideological, ecological, and temporal contradictions. One might hope that the site of Didcot Power Station would eventually enter another cycle, that the former landscape of extraction and industrial production might slowly return to a form of ecological inhabitation. A rewilding project, perhaps? The slow re-emergence of wetlands, vegetation, and non-human life reclaiming the terrain. A romantic return to English nature, made even more poignant by what had been first lost, scarred and destroyed. Not an undoing of industrial modernity, but a fragile attempt to live differently within its aftermath. But the myth of progress remains hard at work. Rather than stepping outside the logic of continuous development and expansion, the landscape is once again reorganized according to new economic and infrastructural demands. The future arrives once more as redevelopment, optimization, and renewed spatial control. In this sense, the site reveals the persistence of modernity's temporal logic. Each phase promises transformation and renewal, while simultaneously reproducing the very systems that generated the ruin in the first place.
Today, following its demolition, the site has a post-industrial landscape marked by absence and ecological transformation, currently faces redesign into another alien infrastructure, the hyperscale data center. Hyperscale data centers, an emergent economy of scale, designed for rapid scaling out to meet increasing demand. What sets hyperscales apart from their traditional data center counterparts is not only their size, but their capacity of hosting millions of users with the speed and capacity to dynamically scale on demand. Portrayed as a techno-solution to increasing AI demand, hyperscale infrastructure has become dominated by the big three hyperscalers: Amazon Web Services, Microsoft Azure, and Google Cloud.
20 years, we may look back and go like, I'm not sure we should have done that. But right now, it feels right.
Power station sites are becoming the obvious target. Didcot A is far from unique in attracting data center interest. Developers are increasingly looking to former power stations as potential campuses, with a number of high-profile projects either in planning or being actively discussed around the country. The data center is a techno-spiritual formation, as it is built on the belief in the role of artificial intelligence in our line of technological progress. Whether we think this belief is right or wrong, it drives materialization.
From up above, in its structural expanse, it looks nothing far from imperial colonization. A cult that believes in a force that will surpass humanity. Convincing the masses of its dependency, it is a matter of faith which renders itself as reality with material consequence. In data centers, we see the dreams and visions made to matter for the tech billionaire class. As a research site, the data center requires confronting what has been set into motion. What we are witnessing is a struggle over power, not progress. It assumes that the globally most important actors are tech companies and asks us to put our trust into them. If the technosphere behaves like a geological force, then the data center can be read as one of its key organs, metabolizing energy and matter into computational capacity, while exporting ecological and social cost outward. Under the pseudonym Willow Developments LLC, Amazon Web Services filed planning documents in 2021 proposing the development of 2 data centers at the Didcot power station. In the past few months, however, a number of applications have been filed regarding the project now under Amazon Data Services.
Those who resist data centers are called Luddites, standing in resistance to progress. The ever-increasing economic dependency on technological infrastructure, which stretches out to military and governance, renders our tech giants as indispensable. However, the data center becomes the site of future redemption, thus functions as a contemporary techno-ruin, a speculative monument that is planned ahead of social consent and ahead of energy settlement. Hyperscale proposals operate as future-facing claims on grid capacity, water, land, and governance that can enter failure states before completion, producing partial builds, stranded capacity, and contested permissions as material traces of a promised future. In this sense, the ruin becomes deeply political, for it reveals, materially, the temporary and unstable nature of systems once presented as inevitable forms of progress. In the logic of neoliberal capitalism, the cycle of progress moves the local further into the global. As the global becomes the local, the relation of the land and the community to infrastructure changes. Despite Didcot Power Station's ecological strains, it is remembered with a nostalgic mix of love and hate. It was part of the national power grid, providing energy to British homes. Amazon, an American corporation of almost unimaginable scale, doesn't offer the same possibilities of identification for a local community. It is an alien, alienating what exists outside of itself, whilst collapsing possible futures into a single determinism. How symbolic for the logic of neoliberal capitalism.
If we etymologically deconstruct infrastructure as a term, we define it as an underlying system that supports society. Infra from infrastructure, meaning below or beneath, might need to meet the ultra to take into consideration of how anthropocentric structures go beyond, surpassing their ordinary limits to an excessive degree. In comparison to a power station that supplies energy to the local grid, the hyperscale data center evolves into an ultra-infrastructure. Unlike the monumental visibility of Didcot's power station, the contemporary data center operates through concealment. Where the cooling towers once dominated the horizon as hyper-visible symbols of national industry and collective infrastructure, the planned data center withdraws into something akin to anonymity. Smooth, sealed architectures not lending itself for human identification, but exclusively designed for uninterrupted computational operation. Its relationship to the surrounding landscape is therefore quite different. Didcot A, despite its towering violence toward the surrounding environment, remained materially legible to the communities around it. Its scale, labor, and purpose could be seen, mapped, and culturally absorbed into local identity. As it did. The planned Amazon data center, by contrast, appears as a copy-paste alien form of infrastructure, one tied not to locality, but to planetary computation, logistical optimization, and the circulation of global capital. Data centers are hyper-local physically. They need land, water, electricity, labor, planning permission, but they support flows that are transnational and abstract. A UK data center, therefore, is one node in a planetary infrastructure network.
This produces a different form of alienation. The architecture no longer represents production in any visible sense, but operational continuity itself. In this shift, agency becomes further displaced into opaque technological and economic systems, increasingly detached from local experience or communal meaning. The infrastructure appears almost autonomous, a sealed, operational ultrastructure imposed onto the land, reorganizing space according to the demands of global computation, while offering little possibility for reciprocal identification from the community surrounding it. The landscape therefore becomes caught between two cycles of modernity: the visible monumentality of industrial capitalism and the increasingly invisible operational infrastructures of computational capitalism. One leaves behind ruins that can still be mourned, remembered, rewilded, and even romanticized. The other risks producing landscapes of permanent abstraction, environments reorganized by systems that remain largely inaccessible, unreadable, and emotionally distant to those living alongside them. It is easy to say that humans and machines co-produce each other. However, what kind of humans have agency in this co-production?